The little girl stood in the middle of the crowded charity ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of people, and yet she had never looked more alone. Her name was Brielle Whitmore, the 8-year-old daughter of Billionaire CEO Celeste Whitmore, and while cameras flashed around her mother, while executives laughed over champagne and donors competed for Celeste's attention, Brielle kept signing desperately with both hands, trying to tell someone that the sound of the fire alarm had frightened her. Nobody understood. Worse, nobody even stopped. Then a man in a faded maintenance uniform walked across the polished marble floor, looked directly at her hands, and signed one simple word that made Brielle's entire face change: hello. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel so our family can continue bringing you stories that remind us what truly matters. Brielle had been born profoundly deaf, and from the moment Celeste learned that her daughter would never experience the world through sound, she had responded the way she responded to almost every crisis in her life, by trying to conquer it. She hired the finest specialists, enrolled Brielle in an elite school, brought tutors into their mansion, and filled their home with technology designed to help her daughter communicate. Celeste loved Brielle fiercely, but somewhere between board meetings, international flights, charity galas, and the endless pressure of being the woman who had built a billion-dollar technology company from nothing, she had begun confusing providing for her daughter with truly being present for her. Brielle knew dozens of signs, understood facial expressions with remarkable precision, and had learned to read lips, but the world around her rarely slowed down enough to meet her where she was. At school, other children sometimes whispered that she was strange. At family gatherings, adults smiled awkwardly before returning to conversations she couldn't hear. Even at the charity event that morning, people treated her like a beautiful accessory standing beside a powerful woman rather than a frightened little girl trying to communicate. Celeste had asked her assistant to keep Brielle nearby while she spoke with investors, promising herself she would spend time with her daughter after the speeches. But promises were easy to make when there was always another meeting waiting. Across the ballroom, working quietly near a service entrance, was a man named Callum Reed. He was 38, a single father, and officially employed by the event company as a facilities worker. He had arrived before sunrise to inspect electrical equipment, move furniture, and make sure every detail of the expensive event worked perfectly. Most people never noticed men like Callum. That was exactly how he preferred it. He had spent years learning how to disappear in plain sight. 5 years earlier, Callum had served as a Navy SEAL. His military career had ended after an operation overseas left one of his closest teammates dead and Callum carrying a burden he rarely discussed. He had returned home with medals, scars, and memories he refused to explain. Rather than chase another prestigious career, he had chosen something quieter. He wanted to raise his 6-year-old daughter, Poppy, and give her the ordinary childhood he had never been sure he would live long enough to see. Callum had learned American Sign Language because Poppy's preschool teacher had introduced him to a deaf child who became her closest friend. At first, he learned basic signs so Poppy could communicate with her friend. Eventually, he became fascinated by the language itself and studied it seriously. He learned that signing wasn't simply translating words with hands. It was an entire way of seeing people, expressing emotion, and giving someone the dignity of being understood. That morning, when the fire alarm suddenly erupted, Callum saw what everyone else missed. Brielle didn't hear the alarm, but she felt the vibration beneath her shoes. Her eyes darted around as people rushed toward the exits. She tried signing to a woman standing nearby, but the woman shook her head and walked away. Brielle tried again. Her breathing became faster. Her hands trembled. Then Callum saw her. He crossed the room immediately, lowered himself to her eye level, and signed slowly, "Hello." Brielle froze. Her eyes widened. She stared at his hands as though she had just witnessed a miracle. Callum smiled gently and signed that everything was okay, that she was safe, and that he was staying with her. For the first time that day, someone had spoken to Brielle in the language she understood best. Her shoulders dropped. She stepped forward and wrapped both arms around him. The embrace lasted only a few seconds, but it shattered something inside Celeste Whitmore. She had been walking toward her daughter when she saw Brielle clinging to a stranger in a maintenance uniform. Her first instinct was anger. Her second was fear. She rushed forward, pulled Brielle gently away, and demanded to know who Callum was. Callum didn't argue. He simply explained that Brielle had been frightened and that he knew some sign language. Celeste stared at him suspiciously. She was accustomed to people wanting something from her. Investors wanted money. Politicians wanted influence. Business partners wanted access. Strangers wanted photographs. Even charitable organizations wanted her name attached to their buildings. She could not understand why an ordinary maintenance worker had stepped forward without hesitation. She thanked him stiffly and walked away with Brielle. But Brielle kept looking back. For the rest of the event, she repeatedly signed the same thing to her mother, "Callum understands." Celeste tried to dismiss it as a child's attachment to someone who had helped her. Yet the words stayed in her mind. Later that afternoon, Celeste discovered that Callum was working another event at the Whitmore Foundation's community center. She went there intending to thank him properly and make it clear that Brielle could not simply become attached to strangers. Instead, she found him sitting on the floor with a group of children, repairing a broken wooden toy while Poppy sat beside him drawing pictures. Brielle had somehow wandered into the room with her tutor, and the moment she saw Callum, she ran toward him. Callum stood and smiled. Brielle immediately began signing rapidly. He responded just as quickly. Celeste watched in silence. Brielle was telling him about a picture she had drawn, about a butterfly she wanted to see someday, and about how people always talked around her instead of to her. Callum listened to every word. When Brielle finally finished, Callum gently touched his hand to his chest and then gestured toward her, telling her that her voice mattered. Celeste felt a painful lump rise in her throat. She realized she had never once asked Brielle what it felt like to be ignored. She had asked doctors what Brielle needed. She had asked teachers what Brielle was learning. She had asked therapists what Brielle could improve. But she had not asked what Brielle felt. That realization frightened her more than any business crisis ever had. Over the following weeks, Callum became a quiet presence in Brielle's life. Celeste hired him temporarily to help with accessibility programs at the foundation, although Callum suspected the real reason was that Celeste wanted to understand why her daughter trusted him. Callum never treated Brielle like she was fragile. He taught her practical things. He showed her how to communicate confidently with strangers. He encouraged her to tell people when they were excluding her. He taught her that being deaf wasn't something she needed to apologize for. And Brielle changed. She began raising her hand at school. She began making friends. She began looking people directly in the eyes. Most importantly, she began believing that she deserved to be heard. Celeste watched the transformation with equal parts gratitude and shame. One afternoon, she asked Callum why he cared so much. He hesitated. Then he told her about a SEAL teammate named Everett, a man who had once taught him that courage wasn't always about entering dangerous places. Sometimes courage meant noticing the person everyone else had decided wasn't worth noticing. Everett had died during an operation. Callum carried the memory of him everywhere. Celeste finally understood why Callum never spoke about his military past unless absolutely necessary. But she still didn't know the whole story. That changed during a foundation event when an electrical fault caused a large decorative structure to collapse near the children. Callum reacted instantly. He moved Brielle and several children away from the danger before anyone else understood what was happening. His instincts were precise, controlled, almost impossibly fast. He checked every child, secured the unstable area, and calmly directed adults toward safety. Celeste stared at him. The maintenance worker she had once barely noticed had just revealed something extraordinary. Later, she learned that Callum had been a highly decorated Navy SEAL. She felt embarrassed by how quickly she had judged him. But Callum didn't want praise. He wanted to go home to Poppy. That evening, while Celeste sat with him in the foundation office, she finally admitted something she had never said aloud. She had spent years trying to make Brielle's life perfect because she was terrified that her daughter would suffer because of her disability. Callum told her that protecting someone didn't mean building a world where they never struggled. It meant teaching them that when the world failed to understand them, they still had a place where they belonged. Celeste cried. Not because she was weak. Because for the first time, she understood that her daughter had never needed a perfect mother. She had needed a present one. From that day forward, Celeste began changing. She learned sign language. She stopped allowing meetings to continue when Brielle was being ignored. She created accessibility programs at her company. She attended school activities instead of sending assistants. She sat beside Brielle during lessons and let her daughter teach her signs she had once been too busy to learn. Their relationship didn't become perfect overnight. There were misunderstandings. There were painful conversations. There were days when Celeste slipped back into old habits. But now Brielle knew she could tell her mother. And Celeste knew how to listen. Callum's relationship with Celeste changed too. At first, they were simply two adults united by their love for their children. Then friendship grew between them. Slowly, unexpectedly, something deeper began taking shape. Neither rushed it. They had both learned that real love was not about saving someone. It was about seeing them. One spring afternoon, months after the charity event, the foundation hosted a celebration for children with disabilities. Brielle stood on stage with Poppy beside her. Instead of hiding behind her mother, Brielle confidently addressed the audience through sign language while an interpreter translated her message. She spoke about how lonely it felt when people ignored her. She spoke about the first time someone signed hello. And she spoke about how one small gesture had taught her that being different did not mean being invisible. Celeste stood in the front row with tears in her eyes. Callum stood beside her. When Brielle finished, the entire room rose in applause. She couldn't hear it. But she saw it. She saw hundreds of people standing. She saw her mother crying. She saw Callum smiling. And she understood what the applause meant. Afterward, Brielle ran straight into Callum's arms, just as she had that first day. Celeste joined them. For a moment, the Billionaire CEO, the former Navy SEAL, and two little girls stood together beneath the afternoon sunlight, no longer separated by wealth, trauma, disability, or fear. They were simply a family beginning to understand what family truly meant. Before the celebration ended, Brielle took Callum's hand and signed something that made him emotional. She told him that she used to think nobody could hear her, but now she knew that being heard wasn't only about sound. It was about being seen. Callum looked at Celeste. Celeste looked at Brielle. And they both understood the lesson that had changed all of them. Sometimes the person who saves a life doesn't arrive with money, power, medicine, or fame. Sometimes they simply stop. They look at someone everyone else ignored. And they say, hello. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And before you go, leave a meaningful comment telling us this: what is one small act of kindness that changed your life, even if the person who gave it never realized how much it meant? Because Brielle's story reminds us that we don't always know who is silently struggling in the room. We don't always know who has spent years feeling invisible. And we may never understand how powerful one simple gesture can be. Callum didn't change Brielle's life with his military medals or his strength. He changed it because, when everyone else looked past her, he stopped long enough to see her. Celeste didn't become a better mother because she suddenly became perfect. She became better because she finally learned to listen. And Callum didn't find a second chance because his past disappeared. He found it because he allowed himself to believe that a life built around love could be just as meaningful as one built around duty. Sometimes forgiveness begins when we stop punishing ourselves for what we didn't know. Sometimes hope begins with a single word. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can ever give another human being is the simple reassurance that they are not invisible. They are seen. They matter. They belong. And somewhere, someone is willing to sign hello.